Carefully look at the position and study the pawn structure. And if you prefer having blacks, then it may seem like an answer to the question of what to do against first d4. Because this thing you can see on the board is what you get playing King's Indian. It is a recommendation, but of course you need to get further into it. You need to see how it looks when we add more pieces on the board. Mainly the king of black on g8 and white's king on g1. Because this is going to define black's plan, having kings on the king side and having a lot of space on the same part of the board. It's going to grant us beautiful possibilities for kingside attack. So this is a situation that can occur playing King's Indian defense as black. You are pushing your pawns on the king side. We'll see how we can reach it, how we can get to this situation. While white on the other side is pushing on the other flank, on the queen side. And I'm assuming you're interested in attacking the king side, then I'm guessing you'd prefer black. It doesn't mean that black is better, it just makes you more comfortable if you feel like you're doing really well and you're threatening. Of course, it's better always to play those positions than actually having white here and being afraid and anxious about your king's position. That's my suggestion, starting from a typical middle game position, just observing, thinking, and then choosing, either white or black. You may also see position like the one that is now on the board. In both cases, black is doing, according to the engine, interestingly, not better. So it may be a very good idea to go for this. White may feel like doing well, but actually it's really difficult for them. First, against d4, we answer with knight f6. The knight is stopping white from pushing e4 mainly, and of course developing c4. White grabs more space, obviously. And we continue developing our pieces on the king side, playing g6. We're preparing to encounter the bishop. Then white continues in knight c3. Idea is to push e4 and grab even more space. Now we're okay with that. We're going for the development instead, playing bishop g7. White grabs a lot of space, playing e4. And now we need to play d6, kind of preventing their e4, e5, chasing our knight backwards. By playing d6, we are also opening for this bishop on c8 to be more active. White has many options here, but we'll continue with the classical knight f3, in which case we castle. Here, again, white can choose many ways, but the classical is bishop e2. Just developing and catching up, actually, in development, because they already got a lot of space. The next thing to do is to just develop, and they will feel like they're doing really well. But now you'll see the whole point of playing King's Indian. First, we need to take space back. Somehow we need to regain some space or maybe challenge white's space advantage at least. And that's going to be done by playing e5. This is not the only move. Again, you have plenty of other ways to try or explore. But this is a way that is the main one, the oldest way of playing the King's Indian. And it may confuse you a little, because if you're a beginner, you may be asking why white wouldn't just take the pawn on e5 and win a pawn. For example, this way. Queen takes, queen, rook takes queen, and then knight takes e5. After this, you can see that there is a possibility of discovering an attack on the knight on e5 by moving the knight from f6 as black. And if the question is how to do the best jump with the knight, well, you may see that the pawn on e4 is hanging, so we may just take it. And there is a trick that I'd like to introduce quickly, that white can fall into, like a trap, and that's in case they'd like to go and grab a pawn, because this knight on e5 is kind of lost anyway, being attacked by the bishop. And they are thinking, why not to just take the pawn on f7? And then once the king of black takes, I'm going to take the knight on e4 and thus win a pawn. But I'd like to maybe pause the video and think of what to do for black in order to win a piece, because this is losing for white. Since this knight on c3 is attacking our knight on e4, we may do like just capture on c3 with the bishop, checking the white's king, which means that b takes c is going to be required, after which we just take the knight with the king and we are up a piece. Let's look at it. Here it is. We have an extra piece. So white is not going to do that, and most likely in case of this, they would just capture on e4, after which we take on e5, and we have the same number of pawns, but black is most likely a little bit better developed. However, this is a line that exists. I don't think you're going to be getting too many of this because it's not that popular for white. White practically loses the center, taking on e5 this way. Kind of, they built it and now they're just giving it away. They're giving the d4 a 4th rank pawn for the 6th rank pawn. You see, by taking on e5 and black recapturing here. And if they wouldn't take further on e5 again, they would just play with the one less pawn in the center than before. Not to mention that this square d4 is a hole. When you look at it, this d4 can never be protected by any of the white's pawns. While d5 for black, if you'd be thinking, well, white has that d5 square, well, black can actually just play c6 when it's required and chase whatever is there on d5. So what you often see here, you may be expecting as black, is that white either pushes immediately or plays castle. And now what we do here is develop this knight on c6, hitting the pawn on d4, and we're kind of provoking white to push. We want them to push. For some reason, we'll see what is the reason for that. Now we go with the knight back to e7. This knight is going towards the king's side and is going to be useful in attacking white's king eventually. Plus, if you'd be asking why not to place the knight on d7, well, you may see simply that the bishop is being blocked by the knight. We don't want that. That's why we have knight c6, to which we'll get d5 in. We have knight e7. And here, again, there are plenty of ways for white. This is a classical position, King's Indian. But we're gonna be going through this knight e1. This may be uninteresting for you to guess the reason for. Mainly, what they're doing is they're preparing a certain defense on the king's side. And other than that, they're preparing this knight to join the queen side, because they're going to be interested in attacking our queen side while we're attacking their king. And the main break that they will do on the queen side is the c4, c5 pawn break. So in order for this to happen, they need the knight on d3. Well, that's one of the ways. There are other ways as well. But this is the reason, one more reason for knight e1. Okay, now as black, we'll do the move like knight e8. Why we're doing this? Let's look at the pawn chain again that we have in the center of the board. We'll spot that it's pointing towards the king's position of white. We'll be going against their king because that's the place of the board where we have space. We have more space on that side and we're going to be pushing there. Now for white, white's going to be going for the queen side. They have this extra c-pawn on the 4th rank while we have c-pawn on the 7th. That means they have a lot of space on that side of the board. But let's say they play f3 here, just defending their king side in the sense that after f5 that we're about to play, and we're going to play it out immediately, they already have the pawn on e4 guarded by the pawn on f3, so solidifying their center this way. It's not the only way, but this is something we're going to be following now. And after f5 to be played, we are okay if white takes it. We're going to be recapturing with a g-pawn, and that's the moment where we can say, well, we have regained some of the space control. We have 2 pawns on the 5th rank. We eliminated one of the white central pawns. See, the E pawn is gone, and we lost our G pawn. And it's normally better to lose the side pawns for the central one. And we are gonna get the G file, so basically moving the king away and playing rook G8 may create some good chances for an attack on the king of white again. So normally you don't have this. White is often not taking on F5, but actually they play just for their own goal, like what they have on the queen side, knight d3. So they're preparing c5. We're not going to be doing much about it, because if we push b6, they can add more, just b4, and that's it. We're going to continue pushing on the king side, extending the pawn chain that we got before. We have now 4 pawns, out of which the f4 is like in the white's camp already, and it's cutting white's pieces from being active on the king side. So we're gonna now continue with the plan for white, playing b4, idea of c5 of course, while black is going to push g5. Now we are continuing, and we feel safe pushing even the g pawn. And why this situation is such that we can feel free, we can feel comfortable playing on the king side with the pawns, expanding, doing this so-called pawn storm attack. It's safe because the center is locked. There is nothing that can come towards our king along, like through the central diagonals. This diagonal is blocked by the pawns of white, especially the one on d5, which is being blocked by our pawn on d6. Or if we are expecting or will be afraid of something coming towards our king this way, well, we have a pawn on e5. It's stopping anything, any activity of the opponent along that diagonal. Also, this diagonal may not be a problem for us, will not be a problem for us, because there is the pawn on e4 being blocked by the pawn that we have. So those are all these elements in a given position that are telling us that going with the pawns is safe. There's no easy access to our king. And the only way they can do something about our weakened king's position is maybe later in the game, like when they open, or if they manage to open the queen side, they come at our king from the side, like from the using heavy pieces along the 8th or 7th rank. But what is important here is that their bishops and diagonals are blocked. They're blocked by the pawns, and there is nothing can come towards our king. They can continue with c5. Okay, we're gonna go with h5, a4, and then we go on rook f7. Now this is a very interesting moment, which I'd like to emphasize. What is black doing with this move? It's not the only one you can play. Of course, there are plenty of other options for black, but this is one that is a typical maneuver by black in the king's zenith. The point of this is that black is preparing one to attack the white's king using the rook. That's going to be put on the g file soon, after the bishop of black goes to f8. Now, why would this bishop go to f8, and why the rook is so good on g7? Rook on g7, as we said, is good because we are about to push g4. And this rook is contributing not only to secure g4 pawn, but also to open and attack the g1 king. But also the rook from g7 is doing a great job controlling the 7th rank, and more specifically the c7 square. I'm saying square because currently there is a pawn, our pawn, which is going to move to d6 after they capture on d6. The c7 square is going to be the entrance square for white. For example, they'll develop the bishop on a3, they'll put the rook on c1, they'll put the knight on b5, they'll put the queen on c2, and eventually c takes d, and something is going to come at us. Something is going to come into c7. We don't want that, and it's the most vulnerable spot in our camp. It's basically the base of the pawn chain, and even after this pawn moves to d6, it's still going to be a hole that is typically used by white to enter black's camp, and maybe even start attacking black's king. We'd like to patch all these holes that we have. So we go rook f7 with the idea of rook g7 soon, but the bishop goes to f8 for another good reason. It's maybe not going to be an excellent piece, attacking piece, but it's going to be guarding another weakness that we'll have, and that's the d6. Let me give you a clear example of it. Like, we'll remove the pieces, we're going to be seeing only the structure, and you'll realize how that really works. So there it is. We have only pawns on the board, and white is going to push c5. They're going to take on d6, after which the d6 pawn is going to be the bottom of the pawn chain, and that's the weakest of, well, weakest pawn in the chain, basically, that white's going to be putting pressure on. Along with that, the c file becomes open, and white would like to enter with their pieces into our camp using the c file. Seeing this pawn structure, it's kind of easier to guess what's going to be happening and where we need to add more defenders. Going back to the position we had before, we'll be seeing the bishop on f8 defending the d6 pawn. So the bottom of the pawn chain is going to be well protected by the bishop. It's not only the bishop is freeing a square for the rook, but it's also involving into the defense. White goes with a5 in order to weaken black's queen side. Bishop f8, okay, we explained that. Bishop a3, and now we go rook g7, obviously. Knight f2, now they're kind of protecting g4 square. You see we cannot push g4 ourselves. Knight f6, we're adding more. We are about to push g4. h3, and now we go with the other knight. We are pushing all the pieces we have to the king side. And what's going to be happening after this? White is going to the queen side. Knight h4. Now look at this activity of black's pieces next to the white's king. They're like starting to create threats. They're active, they're threatening. Rook a2, white is trying to defend the second rank, possibly the g2 pawn or the king. Queen e8, now queen is joining the attack via g6. b5, white keeps pushing on the queen side, but the king is more important. You see now the queen is joining, as we said, on g6. White pushes b6, and after this you can see that the game is getting more concrete. But in case we are ready to play g4, we are already breaking their position, and we are gonna be having a beautiful, beautiful attack going on. You can put this position on the board and start thinking of what's gonna be happening next, and who has better game, or you can also run the engine and see who's doing better. But in any case, if you feel like your intuition is telling you that black's position is better, that you'd prefer black's, not only this position, but actually much earlier, like throughout this whole opening phase, if you prefer to have pawns advancing on the king side, you may really seriously consider playing the King's Indian defense. What we saw is basically the classical King's Indian, when white is just going for the regular development with a knight f3, with a bishop e2. But there are other ways where white actually plays a fianchetto, in which case, surprisingly, you can do the same thing as we saw before. Or sometimes they do some moves like f3, which is a little bit more complicated, but you can still use the same idea, same plan. So this is my suggestion for you. Start from a middle game classical position that you may be expecting in a certain opening, and if you prefer the structure and the plans, you'd probably want to try to explore that opening further and maybe play it. Try it in practice. The King's Indian is played for this reason: attack on the king side, pushing your pawns, going for checkmate. That's the main idea, and of course it doesn't need to be done the way we saw, but that may be the guiding idea for you in any given King's Indian defense, a variation or white setup. That would be also sufficient for you to play it in a decent way.